At 6:03 p.m., this special meeting of the Mountain View Wisman School District will be called to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Okay, before we take roll, we have one of our trustees joining us remotely, Trustee Blakely. So in order to do that, the trustees have to approve AB 2449. I'm just going to read the background information on that. On September 13th, Governor Gavin Newsom signed Assembly Bill 2449, which provides additional options for compliant teleconferencing under the Brown Act beyond those provided in current law. AB 2449 provides a teleconferencing option that will be in effect from January 1st, 2023 until January 1st, 2026. It allows board members to attend remotely without following the traditional rule for teleconference meetings if the meetings meet specific requirements and if the member participating remotely demonstrates a need to do so, either because of an emergency circumstance or other just cause as defined in the statute. For non-emergencies, members may only use the provisions 2 times per calendar year. It is recommended for Trustee Blakely that the Board of Trustees approve AB 2449, which provides a teleconferencing option that will be in effect from January 1st, 2023 until January 1st, 2026, and allows board member to attend meetings remotely. Do I have a motion? AB.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, let the record reflect that we have approved AB 2449, which allows Trustee Blakely to participate remotely. That was approved unanimously. Now we can take a roll call.
Chris Chang.
Bill Lambert.
Devin Conley.
Laura Berman.
Laura Blakely.
Okay, let the record reflect that all trustees are in attendance with Trustee Blakely joining remotely. Okay, we're moving on to the approval of the agenda. Are there any trustees' questions, comments, or a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Do we need to take public comment on that?
Is there anyone, before we finish the vote, anyone of the agenda? Would anyone in our public like to comment just on the agenda itself? Seeing as there are none, we have a motion made by Trustee Conley, and was that seconded by Trustee Lambert? All those in, I'm sorry, Trustee Chang. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
No. Let the record reflect a motion made by Vice President Conley and seconded by Trustee Chang. This agenda has been approved unanimously. Because this is a special meeting, we will not be taking comments on items that are not on the agenda today. If you have a comment on something not on the agenda, please email the board or attend the next board meeting, which is on September 7th. We will move on to item 3, review and discussion of the Monte Loma fencing choice. I'm just going to give a little bit of background information before we get started on that conversation. So my name is Laura Ramirez Berman. I'm Trustee Berman in this context, and currently I'm the president of the Mountain View Wisman School Board. Thank you to staff and community members who are able to join us today in person and over Zoom. This is a special session of the Mountain View Wisman School District Board meeting. We've scheduled this meeting specifically to discuss fencing options at Monte Loma Elementary School. It is part of our effort to run an inclusive and transparent process as we make decisions about the Monte Loma campus. I'm going to provide an overview of our meeting and then make some opening remarks. Today, we'll hear from our design consultants, Carducci Associates, who will review 3 conceptual designs for fencing at Monte Loma and share the input they received at the most recent input sessions. The trustees will have an opportunity to ask some clarifying questions. We will then open it up to comments from the public. After that, the trustees will discuss the various options. We will not be voting on these options today. The vote for the Montaloma fencing plan is scheduled for our next board meeting on Thursday, September 7th. But we scheduled this session in addition to the other opportunities to solicit input because the community's feedback on this topic is very important. And we want to provide an added opportunity for the public to share their feedback with the board. In addition, we are a public body, and it is important for us to deliberate and make decisions in an open and transparent forum. I have some brief remarks about why we're here today, then we'll get started. So as I just stated, we're here for this special session, in addition to the other opportunities to solicit input because feedback from our community is important to us. And we wanted to provide an added opportunity for the public to share their input. If we step back and take a higher level view, we're here today because there's a shortage of space in our community. That shortage is not experienced equitably across our city. Montaloma, besides Thaddeus Park, which is about an acre with a toddler playground, the neighborhood has Montaloma, the Montaloma open space. We've heard from many Montaloma residents that it is the centerpiece of the community. It's where our community goes to play sports, for birthday parties, to learn how to ride bikes, to play on the swings, climb, enjoy nature, and of course have the ice cream social like Montaloma just had. We also have to remember that there's a school there from Monday through Friday. About 300 TK to fifth graders attend school there during the school year. We're here today to discuss how we can best share the limited open space in Montaloma. There have been documented cases about Montaloma students and staff interacting with the public during the school day. These interactions have been happening for some time. Most of them are entirely benign, sometimes they're not. There are also times where there's no physical or verbal interactions, but children or staff are nervous or distracted because they're not sure if a person or an unleashed dog nearby is going to encroach on the space. The cumulative effect of these interactions and the lack of a physical barrier is that we have students and adults that serve them who don't feel safe at school, and so we must act. It is a responsibility of the Mountain View Wisma School Board to address this issue. So let me articulate our collective purpose more specifically. Share the limited open space at Montaloma in a way that provides our students and the staff that serves them with space that belongs exclusively to them during the school day while preserving access for the community during school hours and after school. We've explored different options to address the challenges, and we've looked at these options in good faith and an open mind, but it's clear to me, at least to me, that we need a physical barrier to demarcate space that belongs to kids during school hours. Today, every campus in the district has a fence that restricts access during school hours. These fences unlock at 4 p.m., providing access to the community. They remain unlocked until the start of the next school day, or Monday if it's the weekend, all but Montaloma Elementary. As we know, it's not so simple with Montaloma because of the unique challenges at the site. And we've spent 3 years working to develop a solution to this conundrum. And we've learned quite a bit about the needs of the community and the school. Today, the school board is going to listen carefully to the feedback from our school and community. We'll review, discuss, and deliberate about a set of options to address the challenges. We will do the best to strike a balance between important priorities and the interests within our constraints. Finally, at the September 7th board meeting, we will vote on the option that strikes that balance. Thank you. So we will first begin with a presentation from Carducci Associates. Then we'll have some clarifying questions from the board, and we will open it up to public comments.
Thank you, board. So we'd like to start. This is basically the presentation of what we've heard in the most recent feedback. And we'll quickly go through this. Quickly, the agenda basically is providing you with information on the fence options, an imagery recap, fence options budget recap, staff input summary, community input summary, and ice cream social community input summary, and then the public area takeoffs.
Yeah.
So we can go to the
Yeah, could you just give me one moment? Gonna reshare the other screen because that's where the slideshow got sent to. So,
Great.
I'd like to be
No
as
problem.
full scale as possible. Okay,
There we go. Good.
awesome. I think you all can see that now. Thank you.
So this was the original proposal from September 21, which showed the entire school fenced off. And the upper left-hand side showing all the way to the property line, and the green line was the fence across the front. And then there was a second option, which really fenced off the fields entirely and not the perimeter area that's used by the community regularly. And that was not approved by the board. And so we were asked to provide 3 options. So we went to developing 3 options. The first option showed an area of within the multi-use field area as always open to the community for use, along with the entire perimeter and frontage area. And the Little League field area was fenced off and enclosed for school use, as well as some of the small green area on the other side of the fence. This fence is not finalized. This is conceptual. We would lay out the fence carefully to accommodate the T-ball and make sure the soccer field fits there. Right now, the soccer fits in there quite tightly, but it could be restriped so it fits within the same green space that we have allowed for community use. So soccer and T-ball could happen within the public area. Option 2 shows a little bit more green space for the school use with some balanced area. The T-ball could be, again, adjusted to accommodate the T-ball within the public area or relocate the T-ball if we need to. And that again shows the use of the multi-use field and then the Little League field and the small green area above the multi-use field in the red, above the red fence would be used by the school, primarily during the school day. The option 3 shows the most area provided for the school, including the field area would be accommodated in this scheme, as well as the T-ball. So on the weekends and after school at 4 p.m., it would all be accessible to the community. This has the fence closest to the Thompson Avenue location, but does provide some space for community use all day, every day. Those are the 3 options. The fences and gateway options. We quickly went through some options to chain link fence, Omega fence, which is a style of fence that's fairly open and minimal, and a more heavier typical ornamental fence that can be quite heavy and expensive. And of these 3, we had quite a bit of feedback. And we just quickly showed the opportunity for gateways, but we understand that the gateways aren't an important element for the community. Keep it simple and not draw more attention to it than we need to for the gates. And the next is just the budget. A quick review of the budget shows it's all a little bit more than $500,000 for each option. Next. So we met with the staff 3 to 4 p.m. on August 24th before the public meeting, community meeting, and we had feedback. The feedback we got through Post-it notes, and then we assembled those Post-it notes into typed notes. And these are the actual notes that we have that were handwritten by individuals, and we simply typed them out and made a list, and we provided that to the board for their review. The summary of what we heard from staff was the fence helps create a boundary. It delineates the school and public space during school hours and allows staff to focus on play learning rather than hypervigilance of trying to communicate with people that might be wandering through the school while the children are outside with the teachers. Current condition allows for public to walk through the blacktop dogs off leash to approach school children, and adults can walk right up to the TK fence during school hours, which is a fairly low fence. And children are exposed to some hostile and dangerous situations, which takes away from their enjoyment and enrichment while outdoors, as well as the teachers and staff's time away from focusing on the students. Students and staff deserve more shaded and green space. Option 1, the majority of outdoor use area is hardscape and least safe for experience of the students. makes the entire green space a public park and limits activities for students and staff. Option 2 provides an acceptable amount of green space, but still would warrant having to coordinate with community for larger school events like the Fall Festival Walkathon, which could still warrant hostile interactions potentially. And option 3 is preferred by the staff because it provides the greatest potential for new experiences for the children, prioritizes safety, clarifies boundaries, and creates a higher level of mental and emotional and physical well-being for the students and staff. Staff wants the public to have access to green space as much as possible and are open to show an option that splits the field space equally. Community input the same day in the evening, 5 to 6:30 p.m. Had a list of Post-it notes that were again used to accommodate and document their input. This is a handwritten, original comments, and then we summarize that. We also typed all these notes and provided them to the district as well. So the summary of what we heard from the community at hours and area of use need to be clearly and consistently identified. In all options, perimeter access will remain. Hours are approximately 4 p.m. to dusk on weekdays and all day on weekends. Concerns with dogs due to regulation. Technically, dogs are not allowed on school property. At very least, dogs should be on leash. Off-leash dogs are regularly an issue and owners don't take total accountability. Paths are too narrow for passerbys with dogs without interaction. Soccer field striping is important for girls. U10 7x7 games in all options. Optimal space for soccer play and spectating is not maintained. And sideline soccer access is not sufficient. Kids need about 5 feet to run out over the line. Soccer is used mostly by the city on weekends. Park and recreational space is lacking in the Mount Loma community. Districts should work with city to provide these amenities. Defense options and gates. Gates should be ADA accessible and locked open after hours. Districts should consider technology that allows gates to be opened, closed via phone, app, or convenience. Gates should double, not single, and be as wide as pathways. Prefer fencing that is more transparent, like Omega architectural and colorful, or with plants. 4-foot high fence is preferred over 6-foot high. Many noted 6-foot high is easy to climb. Styles like black chain link and Omega Max double wire not preferred. Interior fences at classrooms for security. Keep perimeter fencing in classrooms. Once an option is approved, interior perimeter fences will be assessed for removal and upgrade as needed. Option 1 is preferred, optimizing majority of green space for the community. Option 2 seems like a reasonable compromise. Majority of green space unfenced for community access. Option 3 provides most space for children to play for PE and other school activities. This option also blocks access from tot lot to green space, which is important to the community. The ice cream social on Sunday, August 27th, 3 to 5 p.m. We had another opportunity for input from the neighborhood, and you can see there's quite a bit of Post-it notes on option 1, on the fencing, and on the no fence idea. And so this is the written documentation of the actual input that was given. And we summarized that with option 0, no fence is preferred, but 4-foot fence should be enough to communicate boundaries. The fence will not promote security, but push away community members. Option 1 is preferred and least bad option. This preserves most green space for the community, but least amount to students for play. Option 2 has added benefit of giving some green space to students for play during school hours. Option 3 maximizes green space for students, but needs to preserve soccer field use and access for T-ball. General comments: fence should be 4-foot high, 5-foot max. Colors are preferred over black, green, and blue. Fence products should be option that provides highest visibility. Chain link is too institutional. Protecting the existing ginkgo trees is important. The fence should disrupt after school play. Curved fence style is nice. Relocate and maintain T-ball to backstop. Public area takeoffs, so be aware of, how much space is provided in each of the schemes. So you can see that there's 127,000. You can see how the existing soccer field fits with the area of play around it, and it could be moved up or down into that same green space. And it's just providing the T-ball within that area as well, and the fencing, and that the area is 127,000 for option 1 for the public area. And option 2, we have 118,000 square feet. Again, the soccer fits in as well as the T-ball, and there's a little bit more green space allowed. One of the issues has always been on these schemes is when the fence is coming too close to the school, there's a concern for the proximity to people coming close to the school during school time. The option 3 provides a secured area and the most opportunity for soccer that could be moved up a little bit and to provide the end play and the side play that's needed. And the multi-use field would then accommodate the T-ball, and there would be fencing and gates that allow people to get balls outside of the fence and to get access during the weekend and after school from the tot lot and other areas of the park. Those are the 3 options. Any questions?
Trustees, questions? Vice President Conley, your microphone is on. Did you want to ask first? Okay, Trustee Chang.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this question is to staff or to Vince Latanzio on that. The slide showed the staff input on the recommendation of option 3. We received in our last board meeting, superintendent recommendation for option 1. Trying to understand what is the district's recommendation. Unusual sometimes to receive a different recommendation from the superintendent than site staff. So we're just trying to see what is the district's recommendation.
So my recommendation was number 1, which splits it down the middle in terms of meeting both needs. Obviously, I can see merits for 1, 2, or 3, depending on which way it goes. But I looked at this as how do we preserve open space, but at the same time provide perimeter controls for staff, for teachers and staff. Obviously, in the ideal world, I think if we look at how it was at every other school, right, which is different. So I think context really matters in this case. We would probably use a different option altogether. But I think considering all of the factors that come into play, the lack of open space, the teachers' need to feel safe, finding a way to compromise and on all regards to sort of where I landed, as opposed to simply sticking with this is the best option. And for full disclosure, as I've said in multiple meetings, I think there are pluses and minuses on every single option. So I'm not arguing that one is better than another. I just simply think, my job was to find a middle ground to sort of bring this to a close, and that's what I tried to do.
If 2 more questions, should I President?
Sorry.
Thank you. Oh no, thank you for the answer, Superintendent. The slide that showed the estimated cost at 500,000. That's higher than the per site fencing cost of the other school sites. So, is there like a reason why all the options here are higher than the cost of fencing at our other schools?
That question is beyond.
The fencing is extremely expensive right now all through California and the country because of the steel costs and COVID and its impacts. And it has literally doubled the cost of fencing on all our projects.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you. And the final question is decisions the board's making today regarding our fields. And Montalona is falls under our city and district joint use agreement. What's the status of enforcement for our current joint use agreement, and what's the timeline for the renewal for the JUA regarding as it's applying here in Montalona?
So currently, the joint use agreement is still in effect. There are 2 sticking points that we have to figure out a solution to. in full disclosure, I just haven't had the time to figure out a solution to get around those two issues. And as soon as a couple other things come off for the plate, I think we'll put some effort into trying to figure it out, but it's on pause primarily because of these two pretty large issues that if we can resolve, then I think we'll have a clear direction about what comes next. The goal would be that hopefully by the end of this year, we would have resolution. We've been trying to renew the joint use agreement for almost my entire time here, which is now year 9. So I would love to get this resolved and move forward.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up. Has the city provided all the information that the district's requesting in order to make progress with the joint use agreement?
Maybe the best way to classify this is that the 2 points don't require data per se or information, but it requires essentially complying with 2 legal requirements that have yet to be met. And these, one of them is, as I said before, the Civic Center Act, which, went into effect, I think, in 2013. And the old agreement never addressed that one. And the second one is just a legal requirement that's, required for anybody who rents a field. And so it's, it's about getting that language captured also.
Trustee Blakely.
Thank you. I just have a question, which I think is also for staff. I actually don't think I've ever been to Mauna Loma during like the lunch recess hour. I've mostly been there during the school day or after the school day when classes are in session. And unlike a lot of our elementary campuses, Mauna Loma, and I think Cape Therakoff as well, has some very lovely interior spaces. And I'm wondering whether the children are allowed to like sit and read a book or, play hopscotch or whatever the things that kids do that aren't, well, maybe hopscotch is a black top thing, but quiet activities that kids might do, are they allowed in that interior space during the lunch and recess hour, or do they all go out to like the blacktop in the fields?
So the kids, when they go to lunch, so there are 2 main areas, and I know Principal Lee is on here also. So if I miss something, Ms. Hausman, if you could anoint her with co-host powers, she can also chime in. But they do use the blacktop area, which is, and I don't know the building, so it's closest to the swings. And they use the playground area that is closest to the portables. And then they use the field area because the cafeteria and the kinder playground area, the cafeteria is actually in the front of the school, and where the kids' lunch tables are. Vince, can you get me to an aerial of the map? Just real quick.
Yeah. Yep.
Sorry, aerial map, not a.
Yeah, I'm gonna reshare this for you. Sorry about that. Okay.
Okay, so if this back playground, I know I'm not controlling the mouse, but the black playground over there, kids play in that area. And then all along this blacktop area, kids play in there. And then they go out onto the field and they play in that area. And they play also, the kinders play in this little sort of half moon shape area. But the cafeteria, Carly, if you could go down.
Right there.
Is right here. So the kids actually eat their lunch in this area, and then staff tries to keep them primarily in this area that's already been sectioned off for line of sight reasons, but sometimes you will see kids over in the bigger playground at the same time. And Miss Lee, if I'm missing anything, feel free to chime in.
Trustees, other clarifying questions? Trustee Lambert.
Yes, this is for Mr. Carducci. Did you receive any comments about how the teachers or the public felt about the use of the baseball diamond?
We had heard back from the baseball coach that he was very open to it being used by the school, but requested gates at the dugouts so that children could go out while he sees them and does warm-ups for pitching warm-ups on the outside of the field fence, and also a gate at the other direction toward the restroom so that when has games, they can be utilized for access for the purposes that their open fence is used for now. Didn't mind the idea of fencing the entire area and having it used.
Okay,
And he
that
was
answers,
excited about not having dogs get there as much.
okay, that answers how the Little League feels about it. Did you get any feedback from the teachers?
The teachers didn't comment on whether or not they would use it regularly or not, but it is a green space that would be fenced for them. So
I would
I
like to
didn't think
note
so.
that during our input process in 2021, 2022, during a focus group with the staff, it was mentioned that the Little League field would be used for some informal play, and then mainly it was more supervised, like book reading in the bleachers and like some outdoor learning, but not necessarily for recess play.
And why was that?
I believe it just had to do with the areas of supervision that they were able to control. As Dr. Rudolph noted, the play was mainly focused to the playground that was in the back of the buildings, the blacktop, the K yard, and then a portion of the field here that was able to be supervised by yard. So it really depended on the amount of supervisors and the types of play that the children wanted to focus on at the time.
And the problem that the teachers had with the Little League field is the lack of fencing and lack of gates. And that's why we're showing additional fencing and gates, so that there would be easier access for them to be able to use it. If you stood in the Little League field, you could see both the multi-use field, the play area, the blacktop area. It would give you a sense of overview and a perspective of both directions in areas of concern for the children.
So you're telling me that if the baseball diamond was fenced, the teachers would use it?
We have heard that they would prefer option 3, which is more open space for larger events, but they would use the Little League because it would be fenced and it'd feel more secure.
So the feedback that I heard at the last meeting was they sort of looked at it as the area that would be demarcated off for them would be the area that they would use. And so they sort of looked at it as it would create whatever the perimeter is that will be it. I think the argument is whether or not that's ideal or not, but that was my sense from what I understood, from what I heard.
Their comment was consistently they wouldn't go outside of the fenced area. They would even be concerned for their large events of walkathon, et cetera, because they would be concerned about, again, the interaction that might happen with the public if it's not fenced.
Vice President Conley.
Sort of building off that, the questions from Trustee Lambert. Did the usage of the baseball diamond also have to do with shade? So the areas that you described from the first focus group, like using the bleachers, for example, for outdoor learning, are the shaded part of the diamond, but the rest of the space does not have shade. Did that come up?
What came up was a primary area that was used by the special ed, which is the building that's closest to the soccer field, is those trees in that area is highly prized by the children and the teachers to be able to go outside in the shade and connect with nature. And those are the smaller children and special ed children that really had needs of being able to have that shade. In the other areas, as you can see, the shade that occurs in the play areas and the playground as well it provides shade. So the open space and play areas generally would have less shade because they're recreational for sports. And so they would be able to play games and turf games on the Little League area and be able to find shade at the perimeter and the edges.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. It seems to me that if we have more community use on that multi-use field, that we may see more of a need to maintain the field. Can you maybe, and I did hear some concern about the maintenance of fields in our community, and I'm wondering if you can just explain so that we all understand how the maintenance of fields works.
So currently the fields are maintained through the joint use agreement by the city of Mountain View. So those issues, I know that, I think in one meeting we heard about gophers or something else, right? So all of those issues are issues that we would need to address with the city in terms of making sure that it's acceptable.
Trustees, any other questions? Okay. Trustee Blakely? No. Okay. Right. Since there are no further questions from trustees, we'll move on to public comments. If you are joining us in person, please make sure you have filled out a public comment card and brought it up to the front. And we will include you in our list of speakers if you'd like to make a comment on this item. If you are joining us remotely, you can raise your hand on Zoom. I'm going to give everyone just a couple of minutes.
Shall I stop presenting at this time?
Yes, please. I see that we have 3 hands on Zoom. And Dr. Rudolph, how many in person? So 8.
Ms. Lee wanted to answer a question about field use real quick.
Oh, of course. Ms. Lee, you may go ahead and answer that question.
Good evening. Yeah, so in terms of use of our outdoor spaces, the baseball diamond, as well as the more open area, soccer field-ish area, I would say we actually use the baseball diamond daily during recess and lunchtime. And we tend to use the area of the soccer field closest to the kinder playground daily as well. And then our PE teacher, rhythm and moose teacher, will usually hold programs and instruction out on one or the other, usually the soccer field, the multi-use field, when those units come up in the curriculum scope and sequence. And when the instructor does use that area, it's pretty close. It goes up to, I don't know, maybe 10, 20 feet to the pathway by the tot lot. And then the other thing I want to clarify was around the special needs classrooms. The classroom buildings, rooms 1 through 4, are actually housing this year our TK, transitional kindergarten, and kindergarten classrooms. But again, all of our students, not just our TK and K and our special needs classrooms, want to use that space.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we have 5 people in person and 2 that have their hand up online. Okay, so we're going to give each speaker, I'd like to allow for roughly about 20 minutes of public comment since we have time. So if we can begin We'll go in order. Dr. Rudolph, we'll do 3 minutes each. And if you can announce who's first.
So I have former trustee Wheeler, I have John, and after John, Ray, after Ray, and I'll call these out as I go. After Ray, Jill, and then after Jill, Brielle. I hope I pronounced it all correctly. So give me a second to put the timer up, but you're more than welcome to go up to the podium. Please make sure you just, we hit the button so that the red light comes on.
There should be a button to speak, and you can hit the button to speak, and the microphone will light up red.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you for opening up an additional meeting to hear public comment and staff comment. I have a few comments. They won't take 3 minutes. Number one is my headline comment is I'm encouraging you to vote for option 1. My second comment is I only recently watched the video of the last meeting, and before that, I'd been thinking about what I would say. And during the meeting and after the meeting, I saw that Superintendent Rudolph said all the things that I would have said. So I second everything that he said. I have 2 other comments. One is that over 2 years ago, our board decided to open up this discussion to the community instead of just, putting a fence in there like all the other schools. So this issue has been live in the community for over 2 years. And I think you've done a good job of getting input. But I will say that if I was a member of the community, and after waiting 2 years, I would be very disheartened if we were right back at the beginning of where we were before, which is a fence around the field. So I think the designs that have been put together are much better. And especially I like design 1. So thank you. And I will comment since I have 3 minutes. Fence 1 is what was recommended to our board by former trustee Phil Palmer, who was a Montaloma parent 2 years ago. So I'm glad to see, that kind of listening to the community. And the last thing I want to say is I've heard about taking input from the community and input from students. Students have written in, community members have written in, and that reminded me of a letter that still sticks with me today, written by probably a 2nd grader. It was printed with great big letters. And the first thing he said is, "I am not a tiger." And he said, when he saw the pictures of the fence, the fences with bars, he said, it made him feel like he was in a zoo. And he is not a tiger.
Thank you, former trustee Wheeler.
Next will be John.
Hi, I'm a resident in Montaloma. I've lived there since 1990. I haven't been very involved in this because I've been busy with work and other things, including hospice. And my concern is this: you're talking about putting a fence up, which creates to me a question: how safe is that? In this age where we have people carrying guns, going to school, killing children, I'm wondering if you're not creating a worse situation by making a killing gallery. Now, I have a very serious concern about this. I wrote to the police chief about this. I've not heard back. I want to know, how do you deal with people coming with guns? And how do you stop children from bunching up against the fence and becoming easy targets to be killed? Thank you.
Next speaker.
We have Ray, Jill Brielle, and then we have one more that was allowed. And then after that, we won't take any more in person. So Ray is up next.
Thank you, Ray Arnado. I may be the oldest member. I attended Mauna Loma in 1958, third grade through fifth, I think sixth of Wisman. So oldest member, as the Brits like to say. I like the last comment. I hadn't thought about that bad possibility. I prefer no fence. We've lived without a fence for years. Don't see the need for it. I like the bollards that you put up. I don't know how well those worked. Maybe someone can comment on that, but you put those little yellow things up to say these are the grounds where the kids are. The notion that you lock up the school grounds for the entire year, that includes all the summer months when there's no school. And then it includes after 5 o'clock when school's over. For that period, it's locked. And then it's locked. Okay, you open some gates. So I've got to walk, an extra 100 meters or so to get on. I don't understand it. And I'm opposed to it. If you are beholden to these options, I mean, again, I say no fences, then option one seems to be better, that you're closing it off to the grounds of the schoolyard and you leave the green space open. And that seems to make some sense to me. What about hiring guards? Was that considered? I mean, it's got to be cheaper than $500,000, for God's sakes, because I'm sure that number is going to be upped. When you build the fence, it'll be more than $500,000. But what about just putting some guards around to chase away people who don't leash their dogs and for people who look like they're going to cause trouble? So I haven't heard that option discussed either. So anyway, I'm opposed to the fence. In the worst case, option one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Jill.
I probably won't get through all this, but I'll send it to you. The district just had 3 years to evaluate and pilot many other ways to protect students, including clear signage, completing the perimeter fencing breach during the last construction process, and adding plantings such as hedges to delineate and protect the open fields. Instead, we created an adversarial process. Instead of focusing on what is best for everyone, unnecessary lines were drawn and became hard-coded. We as a district have experience with design thinking, bringing together stakeholders to work together to integrate the needs of everyone, to come up with solutions that are viable, desirable, and feasible. We missed that opportunity with this and lost consensus and buy-in. I urge the board in the future to remember the importance of this. We, as the Mauna Loma neighborhood, understand fences will be erected. Our goal is still to work with the district to find a solution that respects the history of the park while providing the security that the teachers have requested. I just want to address one issue. It seems the voices of the teachers are drowning out those of the community. As a former teacher, I respect their perspective. However, so many members of this community, neighbors, Little League, seniors, dog owners, soccer teams have felt unheard. Yes, the school district owns this property, but to me, the district is the steward for the homeowners of Mauna Loma, those whose property taxes, including parcel taxes and bond measures we voted for, contribute to the district budget. I've heard from too many of my neighbors and friends in other parts of the city that they will no longer be voting yes on future parcel taxes and bond measures because of the fences, not just at Mauna Loma, but at the other sites where they didn't have as strong of an opposition and coalition. Seeing as the percentage of voters supporting the district has declined over the last 15 years from 78% in 2008 to 72% in 2017 to 69% in 2020, losing such a large voting bloc will have consequences. In 2017, 14% of the yes votes for the parcel tax came from Mauna Loma. I couldn't figure that out for 2020, but historically, Mauna Loma has always voted at least 3/4 to 25% for any measures put forward. Lastly, please respect, we've told the community that this is still a prototype and there's still iterative changes to whatever option is chosen. Let's choose the best solution for everyone and make sure every voice is heard.
Thank you.
Next is Brielle.
Hi, my name is Brielle. I grew up in Montaloma and I was also a student of Montaloma Elementary in the 2000s. I'm here today to urge you as a board to choose option 1. Montaloma Park has been a vital landmark of the community since its inception. It is where many of us met lifelong friends, neighbors, and made memories we'll never forget. As a former student, I can tell you I never once felt unsafe on campus, and most of my best memories as a child were on the open field. The Montaloma Park and field gave me a sense of freedom as a child that is irreplaceable. My friends and I would bike to the park after school and on the weekends play capture the flag or play on the swings. We'd always meet on the swings on the blacktop. And we try to see who can make the longest skid mark on their bikes by braking fast. If you fence this field, you will take away so much more than you will give.
And finally, Deborah.
I walk my dog at Montaloma 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. on a leash. It's friendly. You have the same regular people doing Tai Chi, walking their dogs, running with their children. It's a very friendly, safe neighborhood. We have a community. Please don't destroy the community with fences. Fences add fear. They make you think you have to protect yourself. Please vote for number 1. Keep it as open as possible. Please don't destroy our community. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who was able to comment in person. We do have 3 people now that are joining us over Zoom. I'm going to allow that final person. So these will be our last individuals who will comment. We will begin with Leslie. You may unmute yourself and you have 3 minutes.
I wanted to, first of all, thank the board for coming to our school last week and coming to our ice cream social. Gave an opportunity for us to have some casual conversation, and I felt as though everybody was willing to hear my concerns, and I truly appreciate that. I also appreciate the meeting tonight, as the last one was way too late for me because I teach in the morning at a different district school. I wanted to first give a historical perspective. When my children attended Montaloma, the interior of campus was fully enclosed. The blacktop, blue playground, large field, and baseball diamond were not fenced at this time, but were still utilized by school staff for students during the day. I always felt that the interior fencing prevented unauthorized access to campus, as anyone seeking to gain entry was required to enter through the office and to check in before entering the interior campus. This kept students from encounters with those who were not actively engaged in school activities. This was effective and worked for many years. When the MUR was expanded prior to COVID, one building and several interior fences were removed to enable construction and finish the MUR. This resulted in an exposed campus interior. I fully support an enclosed campus interior. This is the perspective of a parent, a teacher. My first year of teaching was actually at Montaloma, and I was a kindergarten teacher in room 1, great room, and a community member. An enclosed campus interior requires entry through the office, ensures that those interacting with our students have been through our Raptor screening process and have a valid reason to be on campus. Further, this enables teachers to focus on the education of our students without worry of impromptu meetings with parents. However, I feel strongly the big field should remain fence-free. Several reasons why I'm advocating for the least restrictive fencing option. Whether there is a field fence or no field fence, students will have access in the same manner as they have had since the school was established in 1955. However, in the event of a perimeter fence that encloses the field outside access of school hours, for students and community members will be severely curtailed. You've got to remember, those students also live in the neighborhood. Their access is also restricted. I respect the emotional feelings of fear and the feelings of needing to feel safe, but the field fence doesn't change safety. It merely gives a wall. Our students should be given assurances from adults that we are in a world and that we are safe. While we may feel emotional fear, this does not equate to a real sense of danger. And we have responsibility to our children to help them to feel safe when they are in fact safe. My daughter will be the first to tell you that she was allowed only allowed to be out on the yard or recess during lunch. This is to talk about whether the green space inside is used. She would have loved to be able to use the green space inside. She's autistic and introverted, and that would have been her favorite place to be. It's a supervision.
Okay, thank you. And we have a second person on Zoom. Name begins with unfenced. You can unmute yourself.
Yes, my name is Carlos, and I just wanted to say thank you to the board. I spoke with the member that was there yesterday, and I really appreciate his time and his effort. And I just want to say that Montaloma Park is a very happy place. It is an open, welcoming, and a great place to meet your neighbors. And I go there all the time just to see people smile. And I also go to Crittenden Middle School, which has a gate, and I find it's not as welcoming. People go there to run, to do their event that they want to do, and people get out. So I do not want Montaloma Elementary to become like Crittenden, not like that. It's a very open environment. And I was also thinking about the $500,000 budget. It's quite large, and it may require refencing at some point. And I was thinking, I did the math on the security guard. A security guard getting paid $25 an hour would be employed for 10 years and still be the same budget as a $500,000 fence. So option 0 actually at the middle school, at the ice cream social, was actually the preferred choice, which is no fence. And that was not talked about in the slides, which was a bit disappointing. And option 1, I felt, was the least unliked, was the least unliked. And so I think that also should be reflected in the choices. And I'm afraid that the community likes option 1, the school likes option 3, and we would settle with option 2, which is not a good design because I don't think it makes anyone happy. So I hope we don't go for option 2, and we should eliminate that. And in addition, the $500,000 budget could be used to improve the scores of the school, get more teachers, get more after-school programs, and address mental health for the kids that may need it, because I think that's the real issue here. It's the mental health of our community and making sure that we won't do anything crazy to each other. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have our final hand. Carrie, you may unmute yourself.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Carrie Fox. I'm just going to basically paraphrase a letter I submitted to the board respectfully a few weeks ago. I've been a teacher at Montaloma specifically for 21 years. This is year 22. I do remember, thank you for bringing it up, Leslie, when the interior campus was fenced prior to our recent construction. As you imagine, I'm deeply invested in our students and local community. Our Montaloma campus, something that isn't brought up enough, houses 2 SAI classes, specialized academic instruction students, a class of K2 and a class of 3-5. And now this year we've added 2 TK classes. And those groups of students are very prone to elopement. So the importance of the perimeter goes both ways. Our school is inexplicably the only campus in Mount View Westman without perimeter controls. It's really an equity issue. The SAI students and the smallest learners are almost daily, we have to take off running. No visual or physical boundary. It happens over and over. As you know, we're frequently visited by loose dogs, unknown adults, community members who are simply unaware of the boundary. I've personally had to call police to rescue, for example, a young couple found on the roof of one of our buildings. Over the years, arriving in my classroom, sometimes in the dark, can be a little bit sketchy, but the lighting has really greatly improved things. So thank you. Those of you who've reviewed our campus access logs, you can see the time and energy our staff spends every day taking care of these situations, time taken away from our students. And in the current climate of lockdown drills and run, hide, defend trainings, our lack of perimeter controls leaves our students and staff helpless to protect our students in case of a real threat. We really, really appreciate all the time that you're taking to hear from all stakeholders. As a staff, we really strongly prefer option 3. And our first role as teachers is to keep our students safe so that learning can occur. Every child should feel and be safe at school. And we thank you for working cooperatively as a community to find a solution that works for everyone.
Okay. Thank you to everyone who was able to comment tonight. If you know anyone who wasn't able to join, they can still submit their comments to the board. Please encourage them to do so. We'll move on to trustee comments. Trustee Chang.
Thank you. First, the process I hope that we consider for our discussion is I hope by the end of our discussion that we can narrow down to one clear option. Recognize we're not voting on, we're not finalizing anything tonight, but if we can direct the district on one option by the end of our evening, that allows the district to then hold another community meeting with that one option and receive community feedback on that one option, both from staff and local residents. I think many of us attended the last community meeting, and it's hard to get that user, that design feedback when residents are thinking they're still trying to give input on which option. But if we can get down to one, I think we can then get some further details before we come back for a final vote. So I just hope, and I hope that in order for us to get down to one suggestion to the district, I hope we do rounds of discussion. I think sometimes on some issues, we all state our position and then we move on. But I hope that in this issue, we all share our thoughts, see where we're at, and then go through more than one round of discussion to kind of hear where we're at, so that we can feel good about a very clear majority direction to the district coming out of this. So process aside, I'm a history teacher, so history matters to me. So I've been really diving into the history of how did this Montaloma field and park come about? And what I thought was really interesting is a year before the school started, 1954, kind of when the whole community was being developed, there was a lot of talk about putting a park in Montaloma community. They were looking for a 5-acre park. City planner at the time was Stuart Bryant. There's a lot of articles written about Montaloma needs a park. And there's been a lot of criticism of the city that why does Montaloma not have a city park? Well, the history matters because in the 1950s, what happened was as the city was looking to put a 5-acre park, the school was being developed. And the school at that time, Superintendent Arthur Tyndall, offered, well, why don't we join forces? And we'll offer our field on a $1 lease to the city. And that's how we got our first joint use in that area. Had we not done that, had that superintendent not said, here, we can do this together, the city would have bought a park back then in the 1950s, right? But they didn't buy a park because the superintendent says, we have a field, you need a park, let's work together. And in many ways, we still are the inheritors of that good faith, right? So how did we get back then? The superintendent said, but one day in the future, we might take that away. I think in the 50s, the city planner would have sought a field, at least in the last 70 years, right? So I think that's something that's important for us to consider. Another part is the history. Beyond it just being started as a $1 lease, the history shows that the park was built by the labor, the superintendent back then, or what that was the Westman School District. He physically built the baseball field, not him and other people, but then he put in his labor. Residents and neighbors helped put in the sprinklers. The city paid for the facilities. So there's a lot of history here that I think we need to honor because this field will outlast us, right? And it'll outlast the tenure of, sentiments among teachers, which definitely need to be respected. Sentiments can change, but I think that history was something that we haven't said enough. I'm in support of I'm in support of any option that will still preserve the idea that all fields are available to teacher use. And then what I mean by that is when students are present, residents should, during school hours, between that 7:30 to 4 o'clock, I believe that regardless of what side of the fence you're on, there should be clear signage that says, if the school needs to use the field, if students are present, residents need to give that priority to the students. Because as much as I love the history of this joint use, I also recognize this district property, and it should be, every single inch of it should be available for student use. So with that said, I'm a supporter, I'm having listened to the community and the feedback, and I'm a supporter of option one, with the idea that if we, by limiting the fence and keeping the field undivided, because I think if we chop the field in any form, it's going to strangle the flow of that space. The green space needs to, we're talking about open space is a big priority for the district. Anytime we cut off a third or a quarter or a half of it, it's going to strangle the function of it. So I want us to keep the field open. Option one does that. But I would love for us to encourage, I hope that we can decide the fence that's open to the residents, rather than have this language that it's all day access. It is access unless if there are students present during the school day, that a priority of the students matter first. I think that's a really important framing to respect that we need to make sure that this is still school property. I think that I understand this concern of the teachers. I'm a teacher myself. This is my 19th year. I do yard duty every single day. The school I teach at, we don't have a playground. So we use the city park in Palo Alto. And City Palo Alto Park, there are dogs out there, the residents, I often have to talk with them, engage with them. But that's what I do. When I go to yard duty, I take my kids out and I engage. And I know that how uncomfortable that is, but I actually believe that that engagement actually is a security net. So while it's not convenient, it's part of my job to keep the kids safe, because when you put a fence up as a fixed structure, first, there's no research that shows that fences provide security. If somebody wants to do harm, a fence is very stable, they can plan around it. But what has been shown in research is human engagement provides security. Human engagement of both, educators, working with their kids, figure out if there's any threats within the campus. Educators engaging with the public. When I have to go and talk to a member of the public and say, actually, our kids are playing on the field, you need to leave. If somebody was trying to do harm to the school, they will not come back, because a human engagement is, to their mind, unpredictable. They cannot know how to overcome when somebody engages with a human. There's nothing safer than human engagement. Vince Latanzia, I'm saying, apologies, I'm saying your name wrong, Director at Carducci, in the last presentation, when he was talking about why he thought there should be all the access on the other side of the fence, he said, when community members are busy using your field, they are providing security to your kids. Because when those members of the community feel like, they're there regularly, they care about the children, when they see something that looks suspicious, they are your free security guards. But if we are no longer a community facility and our neighbors are no longer familiar with the patterns, then we actually lost that human engagement, which I think is one of our primary forms of security. So I'll just pause here, hoping that we have multiple rounds of discussion. And again, supportive option one, hoping that we are clear that even on the public side of the fence, that student use is prioritized, that the residents need to understand between 7:30 and 4, I hope, that they know that signage is clear, that they have to vacate if children are present, students are present. One quick revision I hope that we do make is, I do believe that in order to preserve the open space in option one, I do believe the fence should follow the base of the asphalt playground, rather than have it, rather than right now, option one has a strip of green space in order to give access to the back doors of the classrooms there. There are doors. I don't know if we can show option one. I think it would be convenient to show it as we're talking about these, but on option one, there's a strip that goes down, a green space that is still dividing some of the field so that people can use the doors on the other side. But that classroom has doors on both sides. There's doors on the side facing the campus and the doors facing the field. I recognize if we face just the base, it makes it less usable to use those doors that face the field. But I think that in order to preserve open space, I believe in option one with the revision of just fencing along the asphalt, kind of going to the younger playground, instead of having it go further down the strip in order to have access to those three doors. Thank you.
Additional trustee comments?
I'll be honest, I'm interested in hearing from Trustee Lambert and President Berman first because they live in the neighborhood as well.
Can always speak last, Trustee Conley. I have a lot of things to say, but I want to just talk about safety. Really, for the last 3.5 years, I've heard arguments both way about safety at our schools and whether fences actually improve or decrease. I really don't have any conclusions on that. But thinking about Mauna Loma, during the last couple of years, safety has apparently been a huge issue. In fact, as most, certainly us, we know that the school has maintained a log of interactions with the public in certain incidents. They have engaged the students to report on the public, as you know, we see by the letters that we've received as a board. And it's really, what I've seen is just creating a huge heightened fear between the school and the community. And then the community is presented with these incident logs as, okay, community, you know, you're not deserving of your park. You're not deserving, you know, you're deserving to have everything fenced off because you haven't obeyed our rules. This is demeaning and insulting to the residents of Mauna Loma. And it, as we've heard from the teachers, it just has required an enormous amount of time that's taken away from their education. None of this was necessary. And I don't believe safety is an issue at Mauna Loma. Bear with me and I'll explain why. And I believe even if it was, that the school, the staff, Dr. Rudolph, and our board of trustees has acted irresponsibly. If you walk around Mauna Loma, there is a fence around the inner campus. Yes, there is a couple of open areas where all it takes is a couple of sort of lengths of chain, maybe 2 6-foot lengths of chain link fences and a gate. There are gates that are not maintained, that are wide open all during the day. If safety was an issue, why didn't any of us, why didn't the staff, why didn't the superintendent basically fix these gates and protect the teachers? No, it was decided to maintain a log, almost bait the public into making incursions, you know, as a justification for offense, and then sitting around doing nothing. I think that was our fault for allowing that to happen. And so, as I say, I don't believe safety is an issue at Mauna Loma because nobody acted on it. I still believe should be fencing at Mauna Loma, but for a much more important reason. What I believe fencing will allow at Mauna Loma, as in all our other schools, is signals to the students, to the teachers and the staff, and the parents and visitors who go to our schools, that you're entering a place of learning. That when you enter, the job here is for the students to learn, for the teachers to teach, for the staff to support the teachers and make sure things are going well. And within these walls of a school campus, there are ways of behavior that are, that are appropriate, ways of interacting with each other, and it creates it serves notice that there's learning going on here, and this is a professional environment to everybody. I see that as if safety aside, right? I see that as being one of the most important functions of a fence or any barrier around an office building, anything for the Mauna Loma campus. I also see fencing, I've heard a lot from the teachers, and I understand this, is that not only does a fence create a barrier, but it does create privacy as well if it's done properly. That there is a lot of concern, and I can also see it to sort of define an inner campus at Mauna Loma. You also want to have it a private place, so you're not, you know, driving down the street and able to see into the school grounds. And I think I'm not going to discuss ways of doing that now, but I think that's another function that we want to consider as we talk about fencing. It's not only a physical barrier, but it's a visual privacy barrier. You know, for both people, for both sides. So, and I don't, you know, talking about fencing the campus, you know, I think historically, yes, Mauna Loma appeared for decades to be wide open. People walked in and out and things like that. Times are changing now. We're more conscious about safety. You know, we live in a world of fear of, you know, global warming, of, you know, politicians, of, you know, all sorts of things. And so, you know, we're not in that nostalgic world where everybody can just walk freely through school campuses. Mountain View is urbanizing, and it's important to further define our sort of zones of interaction. So I do support a fence, you know, for those reasons around the central campus. And I wish we had done at least a partial fencing at the central campus maybe 3.5 years ago when this was first discussed. And that would have saved us a lot, saved the community and the school a lot of things. We'd have a lot less anxiety.
Trustee Blakely. Thank you. Trustee Blakely.
Thank you. Oh, let me get my hand down. We have been talking about this topic and having a lot of conversations for 3 years now, and I think the dialogue has been healthy. But at the end of all of it, what I want is for our students and our teachers and our school community to be safe, and I think we all agree about that. I also want the community to enjoy the neighborhood that they live in and enjoy the open space, and so I keep looking for a balance. I hear the folks who have spoken about, do fences really help? They don't necessarily prevent shooters. Maybe we could get a guard. We've looked at guards. We've looked at every single permutation here several times over. And I think, you know, I have also, which it sounds like most of you have come to the belief that we probably need a fence in some form or another. And I know when we first started looking into this, it was after the Marjorie Stoneman shootings. There were a lot of reports from Moms Demand Action and Everytown Against Gun Violence that did do, you know, studies with data that showed that fences do help. They don't necessarily prevent an active shooter from causing harm, but they do, as Dr. Rudolph had indicated, the FBI had said also, they do allow some time. So I think, you know, reluctantly, sadly, we live in this crazy world where things have gotten more chaotic and unpredictable. So I feel like it's important to have some kind of a fence. In terms of the various options, I liked some of what Trustee Chang said about option 1. I think that's probably the best way to go, something like that. I was looking at it a little bit differently than the way he was. I was wondering if we could modify that curved portion to be more of a straight line so that it would bend, but not give the whole rectangle like option 2 had, but maybe just give a little bit more square footage of field space to the students. I don't know if that would really save that much money, but it would be interesting to look into. I don't know if a curved fence is more expensive than a straight fence, if that made it a little bit cheaper by making it straight, if it was still aesthetically relatively similar, I'd be interested in that. I do want to keep that edge along the building because I think there's trees there, there's a path there. It does allow the egress for the teachers. So I'm not necessarily in favor of giving up that wedge that goes against the edge of the buildings. that is, and then the other part of what Trustee Chang said about, is there a way to do bollards or something like that for special school events, such as a walkathon, or if it were, Principal Lee mentioned that there's certain learning units or whatever that this teachers or the PE teachers currently have been accessing that soccer field portion of the field. I'm wondering if there's some kind of bollards that we could put up on those days that aren't too cumbersome. I don't know how difficult it is to place bollards, but it could be the first kids that go out, help put them up, and the last ones that come in, help take them down, something like that. If there's a sort of flexible way to make the field feel safer, or to use what Trustee Lambert said, designate to the public that this is not their time to come onto the field, just somehow or another to provide a signal that the campus is going to be using the field this day, without having that be a barrier that really cuts out like option 3 does. I'd be in favor of exploring some other ideas like that. So I do really appreciate all the input that staff, that our experts, that trustees, that the community in particular have put into this to make sure that we hear everybody's perspective and try to, factor everything into a solution that balances everybody's interest in the best way that we can. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to be there at the live events, but I needed to quarantine. So I appreciate everyone's patience.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and share next. I said in my opening remarks that we need to figure out how we're going to share the space with the Monte Loma community in a way that provides our students and the staff that serves them with the space that belongs to them exclusively during the school day, while preserving access to the community after hours. And something that I love about all of the options is that it signals to the Monte Loma neighborhood that we want the community to use that open space during school hours, which I think for a very long time, I think people during the day really decided, I live in Monte Loma, like Trustee Lambert, decided that they wouldn't use that field space. And I think it is such, I think it's space that we can all figure out how to use that space together. And so with all of those 3 examples, I think it's a signal that the school district wants to be in partnership with the Monte Loma neighborhood to give them access during the school day. And I think for students, I do think that there needs to be this physical barrier for students so that students feel, we had someone who commented on, people have fears and sometimes we don't understand them. And we live in a different time, and I work with new teachers, and there is that fear because things have changed in our society. And there's this need to feel safe where you go to work. A lot of us, people who work in tech, I don't work in tech, people who work in tech come in and they badge in and they know that they have exclusive use into that building. Not everyone can come in. So you feel that safety when you go into work. And with everything that you hear in the news, we need to afford that to our students too. And I see that as our responsibility. I'm not less worried about the active shooters. I know sometimes that comes up. I want the students and the teachers to feel, like I said earlier, that they have a space that is exclusively theirs, where they won't be interrupted by community members who come onto the field who are simply enjoying the space. I would like the community to come onto the field to enjoy the space, and for them not to worry that the ball's going to roll into the playground area. I know that the neighbors in Monte Loma don't want to have the conflict either. So I hope that by creating that physical barrier, we can make the space a welcoming space for our community during the daytime. And we can have the students on the other side and the staff that works with them feeling like they can focus 100% on what's happening with their students. And then after hours, we can open up that entire space. So I do feel like there's a solution here. With option 1, I would like to see there be a way where on those special days when, I don't know that there are many, when the school would like to have events, that we can figure out a way to, notify the public, put some signs up, there's a walkathon happening. I mean, those are really wonderful spirited events for the community. They're feel-good events. Just give some advance notice. So I think maybe we work on a policy around how to make sure that our kids sort of get first priority on their special days. Again, I don't think there are very many. Maybe there's volunteers, maybe there's people in the community that want to donate some time or some items for this activity. I think it could be a really lovely way to build community with the Montalona neighbors as well. And if there's ever an activity that a certain teacher wants to do and bring their students out, perhaps we can figure out how certain schools use public park space throughout their day. I think I heard a teacher concerned about, would we have to treat it as a field trip, but maybe it's sort of built into the student in the student handbook that they can bring their class out. So there's a standing agreement with families that sometimes will use the space right outside the fence. One of the other things I was thinking is that, through this process, it has been long and clunky at times. I don't know if that's the right word, but I think that we've learned so much about the needs in our community, about the space in our community, and that there is a lot of misunderstanding out there. I know that the signs have come up in some conversations around who the property belongs to. Obviously, it belongs to, the residents of Montaloma, the residents of Mountain View, but sort of who's in charge and who owns that property. Our objective here is to make sure that we have clear communication, that there's clear understanding moving forward around the hours of the park, who owns what, if there's issues with the lock, who you can call, if there's issues with the grass, who takes care of that. So I think moving forward, one of the objectives is to make sure that our community understands all of the elements that go into that shared space so that they know who to contact if something were to come up, or if there's a need in the future, they know who's responsible. I can stop there and see if there are other comments. Yes.
And I'm assuming that we'll go back around, right? That I wasn't trying to have a last comment. I actually am really conflicted on this issue, and I'm listening and trying to figure things out. And so also what I'm going to say, I just want to genuinely share my thoughts and my concerns and then listen again. When we look at the history of Montaloma, the population in 1950 was 10,000 people in Mountain View total. And now we're well over 80,000. And so I think a lot of the conflict that we've seen is as we have grown as a city and the density has increased, but our open space hasn't increased, there's a real struggle there. And unfortunately, that's been playing out in the schools as kind of a fulcrum in the last few years, but I think it was something that's been coming for a long time. In 2014, the city's Parks and Open Space Plan explicitly talks about the fact that the school district not only owns 43% of the open space in Mountain View, but 64% of the neighborhood open space. And it is expressed in that 2014 plan that the city wrote, there's concern that that's not city space and there's no guarantee to be able to preserve it as open space in the future. And the city needs to be looking at solutions. And, it's been a good 7 years at least, and it's not an easy problem to solve. I also served on the Parks and Recreation Commission at one point, and so I care dearly about the green space and the open space, and I know that the city has been sincerely trying to find more open space. It's really hard in a landlocked area where everything's built out. Some of the things that have come up for me are this sort of circular argument around, we have a neighborhood that doesn't have very much open space. And when I think of a neighborhood that doesn't have open space, I want to give the children as much access to open space during their school day as possible because they don't have much open space in their community. I think a good example of this is Castro Elementary School, many of the students in Castro Elementary School come from the neighborhood from Chiquita all the way up to Rengstorff. And other than Rengstorff Park, there is no other open space there. And it is one of the other neighborhoods in the city in a way similar to Montaloma that actually it's very, very dense. There's a lot of people there. It has a very low ratio of open space per resident, of acres per resident, if you take out the school site. And at Castro, what has occurred is the campus is fenced, including the field, but outside of the field, there's a pathway that travels along the outside of the fence, and there's a green area, kind of like small, I would call it almost like a mini park space outside of the fence. There's a tot lot that's outside of the fence, and then the pathway continues down around the side and exits on another street. And that reminds me of how at Montaloma, all of these plans leave the tot lot open, and they also leave the access points so that you can go through the two alleys that also connect onto the campus, regardless of whatever plan is chosen. So there's still a lot of pedestrian activity. Something that's changed since when we started talking about this 3 years ago, though, is we have fenced all of our campuses except Montaloma. And I remember there was pushback from some of the other school sites in the neighborhoods around the school sites, but not nearly as much as Montaloma, about concerns, you know, my child's going to feel, well, we didn't hear concerns from parents as much, but it was more concerns of children are going to feel like they're in cages. It's going to look like a prison. The community is no longer going to have access to the open space. It's going to be a blight on the community to have it fenced like this. And what we've seen now, and I, you know, have been driving around in the evenings to look at the different school sites, is that those sites are being heavily used in the evenings after school and on the weekends. That even though there is a fence there, we have stayed true to our commitment that the gates are unlocked at 4 p.m. and people can come on campus, and the gates are unlocked all the way until 7:30 on a school day, and they're open on the weekends, and they're just being heavily used. And that's really positive. So I think whatever outcome we come to today, we have demonstrated throughout the city that we are committed to public access to our facilities outside of the school day, regardless. When it comes to it, I mean, it looks like a majority of the board clearly prefers option one, is the discussion that's come around. I empathize with it. It's not just teachers we've heard from who are concerned, but also parents and students who are concerned and about what it feels like to be at school there. And I empathize with them. And I've talked about this before. And Trustee Chang, in your time as a teacher, have you been through a lockdown on campus when somebody has run through, and has your child been through a lockdown on campus? Okay. So I have been through more lockdowns than I would like to recall when I was a kindergarten teacher, including when I was a kindergarten teacher in this school district, where there usually it's some sort of domestic incident that happens in the neighborhood. Police arrive and somebody flees and they're possibly armed, and the whole school goes down lockdown. And so you have to take your 4 and 5-year-olds at that time when I was teaching at Stevenson, get them into as much of the kindergarten bathroom as you can, close all your shades. We had these special little catches that we put over the gears for the doors so that if somebody tried to open it from the outside, they couldn't. Like, it is a full, it's hard to describe if you haven't been through it, but it is a terror state to be responsible for these babies and trying to arm your classroom in some way. It's the wildest thing that any teacher should ever have to experience that. And then my own child, who is a student in this district at Mistral, has been through a lockdown because of an incident that happened in that neighborhood. And that's something I would never, ever want for my own child to go through. But I hate to say it, but now that there is a perimeter at that school site where there wasn't before, I know that somebody who's fleeing, it's not going to be their most successful option. If they don't have a plan, they're probably going to keep going, into someone's yard or down a side street or whatever, but it's not going to be the 6-foot fence that they're going to try and climb. And I worry about us. I don't think it's fully happened, but there's been a note of kind of alluding to the teachers being hysterical, or we can't control their fears, but their fears are unreasonable. I've been, also a student of history, and the hysterical woman argument is not one that I'm here to sustain. I don't think that's a viable argument that people are being hysterical. I think their experience is real. The roots of it, did we set something up by what we did and having a log kept instead of trying to fence immediately? Like that could very well have only made the problem worse. I agree, Trustee Lambert. Yeah, no, I agree. I think something that I'm hugely concerned about is one of these incident reports is a man who was coming on campus to use the boys' bathroom in the middle of the school day. And when he was approached by staff, he was argumentative and he claimed that he'd been doing it for years, that he would come on during school and use the boys' bathroom during the day. And as a parent, if I heard about that happening at my child's school, you better believe I would be in that office the next morning asking for, I don't know, armed security, resignations, like whatever. That's not okay. And we have to protect children from incidents like that. That is fully within our job as a Board of Trustees and our responsibility. So I think a fence needs to be there. I'm concerned about the open space access that we're giving to children. And if we choose option 1, this site will have even less open space access for children during the school day than Vargas Elementary, which is our smallest school site at 4 acres. So I'm really conflicted about choosing number 1. I'd prefer option 2 or 3. At the same time, I'm concerned about the character of the park. I think people want option 1 in part because it preserves that large field. So when you walk on and you look and you can see this like almost unending vista, you can see all the way over to the baseball diamond. It's really beautiful. The sense of place there is just, it's lovely. It's a lovely, lovely park. So cutting that sight line with the fence is going to be different. It's going to change that feeling of a huge open space. If I was trying to balance the open space, that character of the park, and let's say like maintaining as much open space for the soccer fields and other uses, and maintaining the access to the tot lot and the soccer field and baseball diamonds. So on the weekend, if you're there with your family, your kids can be everywhere. I would almost go back to one of those first options that just closed off the front perimeter of the park so that when school wasn't in session, it was completely open and people could use everything easily. Except that if we did that, you couldn't access the tot lot and you couldn't access the trails. And so I'm really touring around that as well. But I'd love to hear more from my fellow trustees. And I'm, like I said, I'm very much in listening mode and I'm just trying to sort through all these different things.
Yeah. So I totally, you made the exact point. I mean, that the field at Mount Loma is just spectacular. And that open space, every time anybody walks by it, it's just, you take a deep breath and let it out. And it's just a relaxing, beautiful environment. To break it up with fences would just be tragic. And at some point, I think the school district, the city, anybody who owns land in Mountain View just has to stop breaking up the open space. The school district has already, built on Vargas, which had fields. School district has expanded Stevenson and pre-K classrooms, temporary, permanent, whatever they are, onto the fields there. We're not getting any more open space in the near future. And when we do, it's going to cost. So we have to do everything and make the sacrifices to preserve what we have. I think the fencing, it should allow for the openness as much as possible. I think we also have to recognize that this is still also about children's education. By leaving the open fields, leaving access to the tot lots for play areas during the day. You know, that's where the little kids in diapers, right, meet their first friends, the parents interact with each other. Then having that open field where they can do creative play after school hours, play with their friends, meet their neighbors, and meet the adults in the neighborhood. It's just a truly invaluable experience. And the sports teams as well. I don't think they have had as much voice as other people do, but we have very few really walkable neighborhood baseball diamonds and soccer fields within our city. So to start carving up that area, one would be taking away another soccer field. I know people think they can squish it in, but still, and whether that's for organized and team sports or whether it's for pickup games, that open area, it represents something that's very versatile. And when you start carving it up, not only will it be unsightly, it will be less versatile. I want to we all, I think in February, I think that's when it was, passed a resolution about climate change and green schools. And, one of the items that came up, it says that research has shown that green spaces on or around a school campus are positively associated with reductions in chronic absenteeism, increased academic achievement, restored attention capacity, decreased stress levels, as well as reduced mental fatigue and aggression. And each one of those items has a technical citation to it. So, that we all agree, we all approve that. And that's, in my opinion, that's absolutely true. I would like to see our district, during after school hours, also leverage that open space by having more after school activities for the children associated with the school, intramural sports and things like that. It just doesn't, those fields don't always have to be about organized team sports. Yeah, of course, I do support option one, but when we get to, I would make the fencing very, very simple, and I think that's ways to do that. I know this sounds a little radical, and it's not going to please some members of the neighborhood, but I walk around the Mauna Loma, and especially the back fence that allows back access to the back schoolyard. I mean, that is right up against a children's playground, and it really is fundamentally too close. And there's a lot of fencing that is put in there, to probably a quarter of the fencing of that area to accommodate that path. But I would block off that back entrance during the school day. Maybe allow a little extended time so kids coming in late can go to, at least the kids going to and from school could get there. It opens up a lot more space for the school that I think could be used constructively for other purposes. And I don't think it's, it will be different for the public, but it's not sort of an undue burden. You just have to walk around to. So, yeah, so, and I make some other minor changes or other modifications to the fencing, but keeping that park open, that big open area, is just absolutely.
Trustee Blakely.
Thank you. I was just going to make one comment on the fencing and the visual of looking at the field and, on back to the Little League field from the Thompson Avenue front of the school. I was very pleased when the fence went up by the side of the Landals playground along the Stevens Creek trail path in the back. When I walk onto Landals from the far end of that, there's a little cut through off of not Dana Street, Mercy Street in the back, like where the portables are. Many times of the day, you can't even tell there's a fence there. It was a metal type of fence. I'm not sure what color it was painted, but vertical bars And I understood Ellen's comment about zebras and whatever, but it was, I was very, very pleased at how little you could see it. And I'm not sure exactly what it was a colored material. So I wonder if when, you know, if we were to do something like option one, if there's ways to look at different types of materials and perhaps the color of the treatment, like if it were a green treatment, perhaps the visual from farther away, your eye might just glide right through it. And I would hope that we'd consider some options like that. So that's what I wanted to say.
Trustee Chang.
Thank you. And I fully agree with what Trustee Blakely said about small little design things can go a long way in making the fences feel like you have to build a sense of community beauty. It looks like there, certainly there's a majority in support of option one. I know earlier I suggested revision, and just for the clarity for the district, I fully support option one with my colleagues without revision. It looks like that's where the majority of the board is going, and I put my I support that as well. But I can only support option one. I welcome our board to talk a little more about how the teachers access. And since we're on option one, I would welcome us putting option one actually on the screen, because the community deserves to see the option we keep talking about, right? So if we can put that on the screen. So in our board questions, the option one will put the field for resident access, right? And one of the questions submitted to the district was the value of that. The value of that land, those 3 acres there, is $45 million. And I recognize that as an educator, that if you say that I need to use a permission slip or a process and or some kind of lengthy process to be able to use that field, that school district property, I won't do it. And I shouldn't have to. And actually, as much as I do support option one, if come back to the board, it's option one and teachers do not have priority access to the main fields, then I won't be able to vote for it, because this is district property. I see that as a $45 park given over to the city. We're not in a joint use agreement right now. We are in negotiations with the city to try to get land for a school in North Bayshore. And I just don't see the logic and the timing to gift. I understand the residents is not a gift. The residents, this is a park that historically it's been there and they helped build it. And I said that earlier and believe that. But from a logistical standpoint, to give district land all day access to residents and require teachers to have a process to use what school fields is basically a $45 million gift to the city. We give them a free park, yet we're asking for land elsewhere, and we're in contentious negotiations with the city. So the timing of, if this was negotiated as a larger plan with the city on giving all day access unrestricted with no teacher priorities, I could see that. But to unilaterally say that we're going to create a precedent that those 3 acres on the non-school side is residents access, I don't think that's in my opinion, that's beyond my fiduciary duty as a trustee to district property. And what I would encourage is, I understand for like large events like walkathons and things like that, there should be a longer process, right? We should put out signage because that's big footprint and we have time to plan for that. But I really encourage the board to still consider signage that lets the residents know that if you see a teacher that's coming out to the field to do a science experiment, like they're going to do like bottle rockets, or they're going to do like some kind of physical activity, that teacher can go out to what's still district Monte Loma property. And as long as they're comfortable with the idea, then they may have to go to a resident and say, my class is about to come out here. We have priority right now. Like, provide teachers a way to use what is actually still their school campus. As a teacher, I would find it very demoralizing to wake up tomorrow, Tuesday campus, and hear that a third of my campus has been taken away, or that now I have to ask permission to use a third of my campus. I think permission's justified for large events, but for everyday use, I hope we consider signage that says that residents, if you see kids on the field, just recognize this is still school property, let them use it, and that will still be all day access. I think there's a way for both, as it has been historically, both to be used. I think part of that, in order for teachers to begin to build trust in using the fields, which I hope they do, I think this would be tragic if one of our sites with the largest capacity end up if what the teachers say right now is this, we'll only see what's on our side of the fence as Montaloma, that's a tragedy. And we have to do whatever we can to design against it. And Carducci did a really good job about doing ornate gateways. I think that the gateways between the campus and the field are going to be critical for both kids and teachers to be seen every day and go, oh, that other side of the fence, that's still ours. So I think that the drafts of those beautiful gateways, I think, are really critical. This is a design issue because I hope we do not tolerate the idea and accept the current, I hear it, like to accept the current reality that teachers will basically write off 3 acres of their campus start tomorrow morning. Once they hear we said option 1 is something we cannot accept. And we must design entryways. And I actually hope that once we design open entryways here, I hope that there's actually, we maybe use some of that designs to remodel some of our fences at other places like Castro, right? Trustee Connolly pointed out so clearly that Castro has very little access to community space. And active signage, and I know we're in the process of updating signs and really beautiful gateway entrances, I think will all the more add access and accessibility, especially if people are just trying to abide by the law and they don't want to feel like they're trespassing on school land. So I welcome and just for clarity, I respectfully disagree with Trustee Lambert about the closing out the community access on the Laurel Lane. I think that community parks, if you only have one way to enter a community park, I think that's strange. Everything I hear should be about open space, open flow, and to restrict one of the 2 entryways to the park would be. I wouldn't support that. But then yeah. Oh, the other exit. Thank you. I just think any entry. Thank you for that clarification. I misheard. I think we should keep all the entryways open as the Carducci drafts already show. But I would encourage my colleagues to share what their vision is about how do we articulate so when teachers wake up tomorrow, what are they hearing from the board about the 3 acres that we had just put on the other side of the fence in option 1? Welcome hearing from my colleagues on that.
I'm just going to share a couple of thoughts. So I agree with, having some simple fencing. I also think about the experience that students have inside of that fencing area. So I think student input would be nice to have. I think that if we officially were to go with option 1, I think, that really opens up the space for the community, for Montaloma residents. But I would like to know what the teacher and student experience is inside of those fences and what works for them. I was sitting here thinking about, we've made really clear that we're not going to make a decision until September 7th. So I just want to recognize that the official decision is not going to happen until September 7th. There's been real conflict in our community around, decisions are made without or decisions are made on a timeline that doesn't match what's been communicated, right? So for that reason, I hesitate to have an official decision made until we get to that point, because everything we've communicated has been, we are going to make a decision by September 7th. That being said, I understand that, we have a large number of trustees, expressing interest in option 1. And if that's the official decision on that September 7th date, I think it would be sort of helpful to hear what sort of the next steps are in terms of selecting the material. And I think signage too. I agree, Trustee Chang, that I don't think that teachers should need a field trip form to go out and use their space. I think it's something we should thinking about what's the process they'll use so they can easily come out and enjoy it. But also without, worrying that there's going to be conflict. I don't anticipate that happening, but I want to make sure that teachers are clear and parents are clear when they register their students what the protocol is for bringing your class out, because I agree, I think that they can enjoy the space. Something I love about Montaloma too, I think Trustee Blakely, you mentioned all those little pathways through the classrooms. There's these trees and shrubs around the school. I think that there are opportunities there to elevate that space and make it feel more green within the school site. And thank you, Trustee Lambert, for referencing the resolution that we passed that includes, the green space right next adjacent to the school is also highly valuable for the students. I see kids coming out of school and running over to that field with their parents right after school and playing for a little while. So I think that'll be a really nice benefit. And also agree about not cutting up the fencing. I think that flow, that large open space, is really significant to the community as well. I'm not sure about closing off one of the entries. I get the concern about, that fence that pathway goes right against that big playground. Sometimes people walk their dogs on leash through that back, and I've heard of, kids can want to go, talk to the dog. So I'm not sure what the solution is to sort of creating a little bit more of that distance there, but I have heard that. But I know that those pathways are highly used by our community. And I know during the feedback session, we heard a lot about, people kind of doing these loops, around those thoroughfares that come through that space. Yes, Trustee Chang.
Thank you. Briefly, just kind of the next steps. I think that if we give guidance to the district that we wish for them to go back to community to seek feedback on option one. I think it actually conveys transparency to the community, because what happens is, I do believe we should have another community session for Monte Loma and for the teachers to get their feedback. In the past, when it was 3 options, and many of us were at the last meeting, it's hard for them to give feedback about like how to make this an operational plan when they're still trying to give us feedback on which plan are we going to pick, right? So if it's mystified on which option we're actually suggesting and recommending going into September 7th or whenever we have the meeting, I think it would be confusing. People wouldn't know what to give feedback on versus if we say tonight, like we're seeking feedback on option one. Let's go back to the teachers about that. And actually, I appreciate Trustee Lambert's correction, and because on the picture of that the access point behind the one in the upper right corner that Trustee Lambert said, I stand corrected. If teachers or residents come back with feedback and says, actually, it wouldn't make sense to close it off so that there's a more of a, not a dispense way to connect to that. I would really welcome those kinds of revisions when we vote on it. So, but I think we can only get that kind of feedback from our stakeholders if we let them know we've talked a lot about option one now. So let's go back to the community and let's get real good data on option one, the tweaks. And we've hired Carducci to process that data, and so they can come back with option one, version 2, right? But it's not going to look like option 2, and it's not going to look like option 3. It's going to look like option 1 with one final round of feedback, and then we vote on it. So I think that's a democratic process. I think if we leave today where nobody's certain what option, it's just going to be another round of ambiguous community sessions, which were really tense to attend. I felt it was very difficult and painful to see the tension that was and confusion that was at the last community meeting last week. And so I think that if we say, let's get feedback option one, if that's our direction if my colleagues agree, then I think we'll get a lot of good feedback when it comes back for a vote.
Trustee Lambert.
I'd like to go back and respond to Trustee Chang's comment about his concern that it appears that the school district will be giving land to the city under option one. I think that's the wrong way of looking at it. And I think all of us, the city and the school district, really have to work together to preserve whatever park space there is. And it's not who owns this and who owns what. We really have to get away from that idea. And also to get away from the idea that maybe there's undercurrent here. I certainly many of the residents feel it, that the open space that we do have in Mountain View is so valuable that we're using it as a pawn in a bigger game to obtain more funding. And we shouldn't be using our open space to do that. What we need to focus on is using our open space to serve, happens to be a monoloma, serve monoloma. But I also think too that this open space doesn't just serve Monoloma School or the kids and parents who send their kids to Monoloma School. Monoloma takes from a wide area, from Roxbury from, from the other side of Rainstorm. That's the closest part of this whole sort of northeast quadrant of Mountain View has. The north, I guess it's the north, yeah, the northwest quadrant that Mountain View has. And you see cars pull up all the time, people driving there, people having picnics there, and it's not just the Mauna Loa community. It's a much, much broader area. So, I think there's reasons. I agree with you that the teachers, we should figure out a way to give them priority to use the open space when they have large events and need it. And I think we can do that relatively easily. But not because it appears we might be giving land to the city, because we need to be doing it because it's the right thing to do for the community, not only locally in Mauna Loa, but this whole area. That's the way. So
The captions are being captured, but they can't hear you. It's kind of faint. So if you just pull the mic back, you're good.
Can I just, I have a question for you, Trustee Lambert. Were you thinking, I'm just thinking about that thoroughfare that you mentioned, the walkway coming in from Anna Elka? Is that the one you're suggesting maybe closing down?
Yes.
Are you suggesting that if we have a gate there, that it would be open in the mornings so kids can still get into school that way, right? Is that what you're thinking? And then maybe when school starts, it would be closed so that people aren't accessing that back pathway along the back while kids are playing on the playground? Was that sort of what you had in mind?
I would extend a fence from one of the fences at the baseball diamond to the sort of the outer perimeter.
Oh, I see.
So that whole area is accessible. Under the trees is open. Something could be done with that area for the children.
Mhm. And then that gate would unlock after hour at 4 o'clock. And then people can do the loop that we hear people that they enjoy doing.
And somebody pointed out to me, but that's very convenient for kids walking to school, okay, and home. So, accommodate the opening and closing when kids, might come in late to school, or some kids need, leave early.
Mhm. I think I would just need some time to explore that, because I also think then I guess that would eliminate that back fence that goes behind that playground. So would it be open?
Yes.
Is that what you're suggesting? I guess I just want to make sure that kids don't kind of end up in the alleyway, during recess time, like sort of
You take down
behind
that
there.
fence. You take down that fence.
Right, so that back fence where that blue and white playground is, that fence would go away, so it'd be totally open. And then the gate would be sort of right where the school is, where the tunnel enters, it like hits the school where the portable's somewhere. Right, I want to make sure kids don't end up in that little alleyway during recess time. Does that make sense?
The fence, I see what you're saying.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Just
put it in so they're not in the alleyway. Yeah.
Can I clarify what I think you're saying? Because I'm a little confused. Trustee Lambert, I think you're saying,
Okay, let me explain it. So we're just guessing.
okay,
I'm sorry.
no,
So I get rid of where that black fence is, where that line, get rid of all that. Get rid of that pink line, keep going, and see where the black fence is at the baseball diamond on right behind third base. Just put a fence right there, right straight out to the edge.
Well, you
Or
really,
something like that.
or the other end of the baseball field where number 2 gate is, straight up there. And what that does is it gives you a clear way in for the students. It expands their outdoor area, space that's shaded, but still allows the public in after school hours and maybe make it easier for them.
Yeah.
There are some issues with people liking to be able to go around the outside of the Little League for tricycle training and bicycle training. But that could be worked out with gates.
I don't see that as compromised by that.
Nope.
It just seems like a lot of fencing for and very close proximity to students. That no amount of landscaping and ivy will.
The gate for access would move just at the end of the baseball so that people could open it up and walk around the baseball field and into the blue
The
area.
fence, right? See that corner where you
Yeah.
have bring
Yeah.
that out?
Straight up.
No,
Yep,
straight up,
up to the
yes.
property, exactly. Thank you. It's something that could be looked at.
Can I,
In other words, even with this design, I think I would prefer to just figure out ways to minimize fencing.
Amount of fence.
And again, keep it simple.
Mhm.
I don't support what Chris said about fancy entrance ways and things like that. It's the simplicity that is the best.
Sometimes it draws more attention to an area than it needs to.
can I ask if, so the whole point of that, I mean, just in that idea, the whole point of that pathway, of leaving that path around the back of the diamond open was to go to that alley. If the gate gets moved, why not move it all the way to the other end of the baseball diamond? So that there's basically the left side of the park is public and the right side is school.
That was what I'd recommend too.
So so
Behind third base.
yeah, well, behind kind of home base section or home plate. Yeah. So what if you just extended that up to, no, you could go there, but you could just go straight up.
There's a lot of community use in that area that was recognized in our outreach.
Actually, between home plate and along the left field line, all there is ivy. Stuff on the ground. It's
like
not a very usable space at the moment.
Would it be also an opportunity to push the pathway away from the fence and still allow community access out the alley, but put the path much closer to the property line of the fence so people could wander through and all the way out, and have the fence go further away from the play field to give more distance and play area to the students?
I don't know.
It would.
Does that jeopardize the trees there?
Trustee Chang.
I think there's been enough interest in this. I think we should definitely put these iterations of option 1, 2 community feedback, because clearly we are interested in this, right? And I would, keeping this simple, which I agree with Trustee Lambert, is like I'd be reluctant if we come back with proposals that are going to talk about relay landscaping and pathways. We're already at like a proposed $500,000 budget just for fences. I don't really want to like reshape Monte Loma fields and pathways, but from a teacher standpoint, where the very corner of the field, if you're talking where the pink line, I think it says number 2 or where that going up straight there, you do provide that extra shaded space by getting rid of the original black fence there, but this idea of extending further, you're actually creating a lot of probably unutilized space, because from a supervision standpoint, like to have that wedge, I just don't see a lot of people going out there, because it's, I was just out there, yesterday, and I think Bill's right that, Trustee Lambert's right that there's actually a lot of overgrown ivy on the floor that if we cut back, we can actually probably add another 20% of usable space on either side of that, because there's a lot of overgrowth in that area. But I think seeking feedback I think would be the right thing to do. And I think where the cursor is right now, putting the fence straight up there, I think fills what Trustee Lambert's saying. Inching it further down the field, I think just creates space that nobody's going to use, because that is the most shaded part in the park. Like if I was trying to do some kind of shaded activity, that is a really lovely spot, and potentially even more lovely if we cut back the overgrowth. So I take back what I said earlier about my resistance to Trustee Lambert. I think it's a good idea for community feedback.
One of the other comments that we heard from the public was that are there going to be any improvements to the area where the pathway, the tot lot, and all this area that we're just talking about, that would make it more usable and beneficial to the public use? What our response was, it's a separate project in the future.
That's correct. Okay. Trustee Lambert, did you want to add anything else? I noticed your microphone is on. Oh, I see Trustee Blakely.
Thank you. I just want to say I pulled up a map of an aerial map of the Mauna Loma neighborhood, and that Ilka Avenue alley entrance in that back corner that we're discussing. More than half of the Mauna Loma neighborhood that's a much more accessible point to get to the Mauna Loma Park than the Thompson or the Laura Lane one. And so I'm not really in favor of doing that. I like the idea of more space for the kids, but if the point of it is to preserve access to the community, I think that that idea doesn't make sense. I also feel like that's a kind of a more major change. And I know once we vote a week from Thursday, which is after the Labor Day weekend, I might point out. So I'm not sure there's going to be time for any more community sessions, although of course, as always, I, and I'm sure the rest of you, would encourage the community and the school community and the neighborhood community to email us. We can get email and factor that into our ultimate decision a week from Thursday. But once we pick a plan, that isn't necessarily the last final word. That's the point where you would start refining the plan a little bit. So, I mean, you know, I know I had a suggestion of tweaking the number 1 a little bit. Others of you had some other suggestions. And, you know, I think we could explore those things. But at this point in the game, I think trying to redo the northwest corner entrance, to just cut that off, except for at the beginning of school and then after school, it's kind of a fundamental change, and I'm not in favor of it. So
if I could just, I'm sorry.
I just appreciate the sentiment that goes into it, but I feel like we're moving off of what we've been discussing.
I think the process moving forward, once the board approved direction, we would schedule a site walk with the district staff, construction manager, and principal to walk the site, confirm the scope of fencing repairs, replacements, removals, code upgrades, and new locations of fences and gates. We will then prepare a schematic design plan with elevations, locations, materials, colors, gates, heights, gate sizes and types, school access, construction documents, and then we'd provide you with an SG plan that would have to get approval. And in the meanwhile, we would be getting more input from the board on refinements. But that's typically the process. Having another community meeting after all the community meetings we've had, I'm not sure we'd get any new information.
Trustee President.
Yes.
I recall, though, however, at our last community meeting, I think it was pretty clear that we made a promise to the community that there would be a community input meeting before the vote. Other people were in attendance. I don't know, but I'd say that that's my recollection. I also think that, you know, we've been doing this 3 years. I really welcome seeing this to an end, but I think that there is no harm, even if it did mean that we would have to move back the vote, one more board meeting. Like, I do think that now that there's a sense of which one we're going, to get feedback from the residents who live in that neighborhood, to get feedback from the teachers. And I agree with Trustee Blakely that there is going to be details decided later when this becomes an operational plan, right? So like once we vote on it, there's certainly going to be revisions from all the things that Vince was talking about. So Trustee Blakely is totally correct. But I do think that, especially if we're exploring Trustee Lambert's revision, that definitely needs community input, right? And so I think that there's no harm. And I think it'd actually be a useful meeting. It's like, everyone's clear where we're going. Let's get some final tweaking feedback. Especially, I agree with Trustee Blakely that this is, if we go with what Trustee Lambert's saying, and I see the merits what he said, and I see the merits what Trustee Blakely saying, I think we need community input before we vote.
So just want to clarify, the comment was if the board created a new design altogether, would more community feedback take place? And so my response was, if it's not one of these 3, then I would suspect yes. The only thing I would just say is we've conducted 3 community meetings in less than a week, and we're hitting the holiday break. And while yes, we can bring the designs back, ideally what I would argue is approve conceptually design. Let us, because some of these things may not be things that we can or cannot do. Allow us to go through that and we'll bring those back. And then, because we know which path we're headed on, And then you'll have an opportunity to finalize it. And if it's possible, and I don't know if this is true, but I would actually argue to fast track the greening at Montaloma and try to do both at the same time, because you're already going to put the campus under a lot of construction again. And so if you're planting trees or carving out green space and putting extra fences, you might as well do it all at once.
I think we all agree with that, but I agree with Trustee Blakely then that we need to be clear, if we're discussing removing one of the 3 access points to the park, I think that is a substantial change, and I think it should desire community input. If we are saying that we're not going to entertain removing that access point, then I think you're right. If we don't do a community meeting, then we're basically doing option 1. But I just need the board to be clear here. If we are entertaining removing an entry point, that is a substantial change. I think that is in the spirit of us letting the community know. And I'm in full agreement with Trustee Blakely then that that's a change. If we don't want to make the change, then let's not have the community meeting and let's go to do the vote. But then on that next September meeting. So like, are we entertaining cutting an access point? Because if we do, we need to get input, in my opinion.
So can I weigh in real quickly on the idea of moving forward the Green Campus work? So we're developing a Campus Index for the precise reason to make sure that we're doing it in an equitable way. And unfortunately, I know we have other campuses that have less usable green space for children or the community than Montaloma. So it's not that we don't want to get there, but that's a whole other design process. I mean, we're talking about 6 months more of design review. And I feel like we've dragged this out for the community for so long. I don't think that behooves any of us. I don't think that's good for the community, the school, the board, no one, not for staff. I also don't think dragging this past September 7th, when we have said over and over and over and over that September 7th is when this will come as an action item, is good either.
So can I get guidance from the board as in, are we entertaining cutting off the entry point? Because I think if we do, I think we're going to shock a good chunk of Montaloma saying like, wait, I thought you always letting us know about big changes. The entry point's a big change. I agree with Trustee Blakely. Like, so I'm just trying to get senses. Is this something we're entertaining? And I'm not getting a sense from, I'm on the board here and I can't tell if this is something we're telling is to guidance to the district or not.
Okay. Trustee Lambert.
I guess in response, what problem are we trying to solve here? Okay. And the problem as I see it when I walk by there is that there's a lot of fencing that is right adjacent to a heavily used playground. And if I'm listening to the teachers, right, about wanting separate fences to give separation, right, between the students and the public and to provide privacy, that fence basically it just is a glaring opportunity to to defeat that purpose. And yes, I can see ways of trying to accomplish the goal of putting the privacy in, but all in all, it just seems like a lot of fence and will be a lot of work to try to keep that private and to keep that separated enough. It'd be a very narrow path for the public. In the idea of keeping things simple, it may not be worth the effort. And you're absolutely right. Many members of the public are going to be very, very upset about this. There's no question. Does it prevent them from doing anything they would otherwise do? No, it makes the walk a little bit longer, less convenient to get onto the school grounds. But I see that as, again, being a compromise here. And it does open up to me, you would look back there, it'll open up a lot more space for the school that is not used right now at all.
Trustee Blakely.
I don't think we should make that change. I think I said that before. If you're concerned about the privacy piece, I think there's other ways, such as ivy or pittosporum or some kind of a greening on the fence, some kind of plants to create more visual separation from that corner. But I think the way I'm looking at this is making it safe, making everybody feel safe, and also balancing the community's interest in the access to the park. And I feel like that would severely hamper that access piece. And so I'm not in favor of it. I'm not sure if we're taking a straw poll, but the other comment that I wanted to make to Trustee Conley's comment about the greening, I definitely, our plan on greening is equity. And I think we talked about like Stevenson and Castro Mistral and Vargas, having a higher need, but we've postponed some of the solar and some other things, in timing with the construction. And I think we have to keep finances and such in mind as well. I think there's a perception that because of the beautiful park, Mauna Loma maybe is lower on the equity scale for the greening, because it already has more green than some of these other schools that I've mentioned. But I think if there's a way to combine stages so that we could do them at the same time, I am all in favor of that. So I don't think we can necessarily look at these things in isolation. And I think if there's a way realistically to not put the fencing decisions off too long, keeping in mind that normally those kinds of things are done over the summer anyway, and over school breaks, I think it might make a whole lot of sense to combine the effort with the greening of Mauna Loma.
Dr. Rudolph?
Yep. So just for a process standpoint, it has to go through, it has to be designed, has to go through DSA, has to be bid out the contract, right? And half of the schools are actually, for the conceptual greening, will come in December. So I think if we think about the timeline, it's possible, and I don't know which schools they're currently working on, but it's possible this may all coincide together. I don't think it's feasible for us within less than a week's time to get substantive feedback and to address it. And I think there's other items, such as what Trustee Lambert has brought up, in terms of gates that we would have to get through DSA anyway, that currently aren't up, that expose the campus, that need to be included in. And so what I would argue is, if the board votes on the first, give us the time to walk, make sure everything's done, and we can bring back different iterations that you can then weigh, and you'll have to approve a final design anyway. And at that time, it would have gave us enough time to do due diligence to go out. If we go out within a week and say the idea is to close off the fence, I think we'll be right back where we are with debating stuff. But if we give time, let this sort of settle, have some conversations, look at different iterations, involve sports leagues, parents, teachers, community members, I think it will work itself out, and we'll make sure we bring all that back. I'm just a little concerned that before the 7th, having another community meeting and trying to get feedback may not be feasible.
I hear that. I fear that what we're trying to do to save like 2 weeks in board meeting may be creating kind of like a mini Monte Loma process over again. I agree with the Monte Loma resident community, Trustee Lambert, that closing off an entryway would be a very controversial issue. I really want Monte Loma issue to be settled. If, for example, like if we voted on September on option 1, but we left open this highly kind of, for some people, highly upsetting idea of losing an entryway, and then we're creating a whole nother community process, then we've created this like new mini Monte Loma issue that's going through a community pain and drawn out. I would rather either we don't consider closing off the gateway and we just finish this issue and we do not entertain Trustee Lambert's revision, which is what Trustee Blakely said, and I can fully support that. Or we entertain it because there's merits to it, and we hold on, and thank you. I'm really brief. And we just push back a few weeks and we have 1 or 2 more community. We do the community theme, and then it's still going to have all these details to come later. But this isn't a detail issue. This is an access point, right? Let's get it done so that the community can no longer have this trauma. So it's like one or another. Like either we go Trustee Blakely route. So
I'm trying to help you.
thank you. Thank you.
I'll be the third, so let's not do it. You, me, Laura, done.
Yes, and I'm with you too, as well. So there you go. I like the idea, but I think it's going to complicate things. So I think we just want to make this clean. Yeah. Okay. Yes, Trustee Lambert.
Are we talking other modifications too?
No.
Not one. Other modifications,
Well,
we can leave that. to
depends
another
on the,
meeting.
yes, I think we're going to vote, give really clear direction at the 7th, on the 7th, and then the district will come back with, can you just let us know what you're going to come back with after we vote on the 7th? Remind us what the process is or the next.
So you would conceptually approve sort of a design. And I think you've given a lot of feedback in terms of curves, entryways, simplicity, fences. You know, even I've mentioned like that back area, opening it up a little bit more. Let us sort of look at what's feasible and what isn't feasible, what we can and cannot do, and then we will bring back another iteration or closer to finish design that takes into account sort of all the factors. But we, in theory, need for you to say, yes, move forward with this, and then we can come back with some other iterations. And that at least gives the team time to sort of, although this DSA process is shorter, it still is a DSA process, and we all know how that goes depending on what's happening in Oakland in their office. So, but we will move as quickly as we can to bring resolution. I think that is clear, and then we'll bring back some other iterations. And I think even if we don't close off, since you said no to close off the bat, there are other things that we can do. And this is the reason why I brought up greening. It is possible that we can grow an ivy vine to provide some privacy over by that area. I mean, I think it's these little things that we just need to investigate a little bit more that will help us to sort of address some of these other concerns that y'all have raised individually. Is that fair? Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, so if we don't have any more comments, I'd like to thank everyone who was able to come and join us for this special meeting, who commented in person. I'd like to thank everyone who joined us over Zoom. We will have a final decision at our next board meeting on the 7th. I want to thank our design firm, Carducci Associates, with Carly and Vince, for holding 11 community meetings and cataloging over 100 emails and community survey responses and 148 student surveys. So thank you so much for taking all of that input into consideration. We look forward to that meeting on September 7th. Okay, so that'll be our future board meeting, and let's see, at 8:31 p.m. we will now adjourn the meeting of the Mountain View Wisma School District.